I'm Karen Morgan, and this is the Purple Bike Podcast. Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about 1990, a new decade. In 1990, I was living in Atlanta, traveling around the country for trade shows and slinging propaganda about polypropylene. I spent a lot of time in the bars in Buckhead with my friends back when Buckhead was just a ramble of fun bars before somebody decided to level the whole area to try to make it be Rodeo Drive, which just doesn't work. Boo, we miss the bars. Thankfully, in 1990, the big hair and shoulder pads of the 80s were out, and they were replaced with much more minimal spaghetti straps and jeans and t-shirts and bob haircuts. Some of the new things that we saw in 1990 were Beano. Beano was an enzyme supplement that you're supposed to take before you eat so you won't have gas. It's really just an anti-fart pill, so go ahead, eat those beans. We also had Aussie shampoo and hair products that came out in the purple bottle with a kangaroo. They were sold in Australia before 1990, but they got released here then, and I still use them. We also got Rembrandt toothpaste that year, which was a stain removal toothpaste. The original product was actually called Canker Sore toothpaste, which sounds oh so appealing. I think they did a lot better after they changed the name. And in 1990, one of my favorite restaurants opened for the first time. The first Zaxby's was created by Zach McElroy, who, like me, is from Athens and went to the University of Georgia. We used to have a restaurant in Athens called Guthrie's when I was in school, and they only served chicken fingers with French fries and slaw and Texas toast. But the best part about Guthrie's was their sauce. So Zach based his Zaxby's on the Guthrie's chicken and sauce concept. The first Zaxby's opened in Statesboro, Georgia in March of 1990 near Georgia Southern, and they now have over 900 locations around the country, but so very sadly not one here in Maine. 1990 brought us some great music. The number one song that year was Hold On by Wilson Phillips. The number two song was It Must Have Been Love by Roxette. And the number three song was Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor. We also had some other really fun songs that year by Technotronic.
Pump up the jam, pump it up while your feet are stumping. And the jam is pumping. Look ahead, the crowd is jumping. Pump it up a little more, get the party going on the dance.
Vanilla Ice.
Ice, baby. All right, stop, collaborate and listen. Ice is back with my brand new invention.
And MC Hammer.
You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. You can't touch this. My music hits me so hard.
And Athens' own B-52s made it into the top 40 again with Rome. And also Love Shack. As someone who was born and raised and went to school in Athens, Georgia, I know where the Love Shack is, but I can't tell you. There were some great TV shows that came out in 1990. A lot of shows that year were based on movies like Ferris Bueller and Uncle Buck and Parenthood, but most of those didn't really translate well into television. The three shows that I liked best in 1990 were written especially for television. The first one was Northern Exposure. This show was kind of drama, kind of comedy, and it was about a new doctor, played by Rob Morrow, who ends up as the town doctor in a little tiny town called Sicily, way out in Alaska. It was a great ensemble show. It basically showed him trying to adapt from living in New York to living in this tiny town in Alaska. Janine Turner played the air taxi pilot Maggie O'Connell and kind of his love interest. This show was my first introduction to John Corbett, who won an Emmy in this show for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Chris Stevens, and later went on to star in Sex and the City and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. A very funny show that came out in 1990 was In Living Color, which was a sketch comedy show created and written by Keenan Ivory Wayans. It also had a lot of his family members like Damon and Kim and Sean and Marlon and Dwayne. In Living Color also launched the careers of other people like Jamie Foxx. Who can forget his Wanda character? Also, Jim Carrey was on In Living Color. I loved Fire Marshal Bill. They also had Tommy Davidson and David Alan Grier. In Living Color was where we first met Jennifer Lopez as part of the Fly Girls, who was their dance troupe, with Rosie Perez as their choreographer. I think my favorite show that came out in 1990 was Wings, which ran for 8 seasons, and it had Tim Daly and Steven Weber as brothers who operated a 2-plane airline on Nantucket. Thomas Hayden Church was also in the cast, as was Tony Shalhoub. Wings was created and produced by Cheers veterans David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee. So characters from Cheers also occasionally made appearances on Wings. In one of the episodes, Cliff Clavin and Norm Peterson go over to Nantucket to go fishing, but they never got to fish because they never left the bar. I was lucky enough to travel to Nantucket many times for the comedy festival out there. I always go out there on Cape Air, which is out of Logan Airport, or on the ferry. The airplane for the show Wings was actually a 1981 Cessna, which was eventually sold to Cape Air, where it is still flying. Many great movies came out in 1990. The biggest hit at the box office was Ghost, with Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Whoopi Goldberg, who won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and the movie also won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. This is a story about a couple who makes pottery. Well, sort of. Okay, actually it's a story about a guy who gets killed and comes back as a ghost. But mostly I just remember the pottery. The Oscar for Best Film in 1990 went to Dances with Wolves. This also won Best Score and Best Director for Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner plays a guy who goes out on the prairie and makes friends with the Native Americans and dances with wolves. I don't know. I don't really remember a lot of it. I did like the girl who played Stands with Fists. I thought she was the best part, but sorry, Kevin Costner, that's kind of all I remember. We had some sequels in 1990. We had Back to the Future Part 3 and Die Hard 2. Other movies I liked that year were Presumed Innocent with Harrison Ford. This was a great movie about an attorney who's accused of murder and has a great twist at the end. We also had Goodfellas, which was directed by Martin Scorsese with Robert De Niro, Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, and Paul Sorvino. What a fun movie that was. We also had the movie Misery. This was based on a book written by Stephen King, who lives here in Maine. Kathy Bates won Best Actress for her performance in Misery. There was also Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the first version of it. But I think my 2 favorites that year were Home Alone, which was written and produced by John Hughes and directed by Chris Columbus. Home Alone starred Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, John Hurd, and the wonderful Catherine O'Hara. In the movie, Macaulay Culkin is 8 years old and he gets left by his entire family at home for Christmas vacation, and then he has to defend his house from felons. This would be so terrifying if it were in real life, but if it's written and produced by John Hughes and directed by Chris Columbus, it's just a really sweet and funny movie. And I loved Pretty Woman. It was directed by Gary Marshall and written by J.F. Lawton. Julia Roberts plays a hooker with a heart of gold, and Richard Gere plays her escort, or someone who hires her to be his escort, and in the end, they fall in love. One of my favorite actors in Pretty Woman was Larry Miller. It also starred the wonderful Hector Elizondo and the late Ralph Bellamy. The original script for Pretty Woman was much darker. The original film title was actually 3000. I think that's based on what money she got offered to spend the weekend with him. It originally wasn't really a rom-com. It was more about the seedy side of what Julia Roberts' character did for work. But the story was changed to be a lot more clean and shiny and romantic. J.F. Lawton wrote the original script, and it took 3 more writers to work on fixing it. Stephen Metcalf, Robert Garland, and Barbara Benedek all contributed to the final script of The Pretty Woman that we know today. So 1990 ended up being a very fun year. We had shiny bob haircuts that we washed with Aussie shampoo. We were pumping up the jam with Technotronic. We were eating piles and piles of Zaxby's chicken fingers with Zaxby sauce, and no one was farting. Join me next time when we talk about 1991. When Thelma and Louise take a road trip, Hannibal Lecter eats some fava beans, and REM loses their religion. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Y'all have a great day.